Hi. Oh, there's a strange picture appearing here. Oh, hang on. There's somebody here already other than me. Okay. So that's Jerome. Hang on. I think you've joined as muted. Hang on. There are some other people. Yeah, I can ask you to unmute. There are some other people who may be joining. There's been some confusion over this because of time zones and stuff. So I'm actually going to start another meeting at 2 o'clock, but we can have one now. And that would be good. There are more people connecting. Great. Okay, that's super. Yeah, good. Matt, and I think that's my daughter there as well. Lovely. Okay, somebody else might be joining us now from New York, but I'll just message them. So yeah, I can. Right. Okay. So I'm going to ask you all to unmute yourselves because there's not many people here, and then you can hopefully not interrupt me too much. Oh, hang on. Can everybody speak?
Hello.
Hello. Marvelous. Marvelous. Okay. Good. Right. Now this is a bit novel for me, using this platform quite in this sort of business-like way, and being able to share screens and stuff like that. So we'll see how we go. Great. So I've got these ideas, and there's a whole raft of different ways of thinking about them and presenting them and trying to understand them. And I suppose it's in part how you get your brain around them and who you're trying to present to that makes you decide as to how to actually share them to people. Actually, if I do a share screen, yeah, okay, all right, that's me. Share screen, hopefully. Share. Oh, hang on. Share. Yes, I've shared. Then you can see, the difficulty that it's possible to have. Right now, the sharing that you can do via. I'll just close all of those actually for the time being, and then start again because there's too much stuff open. Via Google, with Google Documents, if you share online, when you look at the editor, you can have a nice fluffy version that makes sense, and then when you share it, it looks pretty horrible. So also the technology is against you when you're trying to share stuff, which makes it hard. Now, when I was trying to think about how to share this, this is the link that you'll go to, that is my Google document that explains my ideas. But I've tried to do this as a way of sharing to multiple technical people and also as a general introduction. So that's a bit tricky. So multiple general introduction to specialist people, but actually we're not going to do that. We're going to try and do a more user-friendly one. Has anybody read the document at all?
No, not yet.
Not yet. No. Okay. Oh, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm trying to hook a bunch of techie people into reading the idea and then reading a great deal more. Maybe I ought to have a covering letter instead. But then, of course, people are concerned about human-like minds and safety and stuff. And actually, as I've just described to someone, because we're all thoroughly entertained by the Terminator films, but that is fiction rather than reality. You've got to ask your question, during the course of the time that mechanical engineers have been building and repairing cars, have they ever made one that flied by accident? And the answer is no. Well, that's because that's the way technology works. You could, as a mad scientist, decide to design an AI that would be designed to take over the world. If you understood what you were doing, you wouldn't accidentally make a flying car, make a flying pig. That is more the real world of how stuff works. You can design stuff so it does what it says on the tin, more or less. It won't suddenly become a flying car when you never intended it ever to be such a thing. So I won't read too much more about that, but that's a quickie one for people. Now, there's a load of stuff about philosophy, which I could talk about, but I'm going to skip over that and come back to that, because it's a bit more difficult to, less intuitive, perhaps. This is a document that I put together in part for academics, because actually, when you try and break down this problem, if you think about it as being like one of those impossible Chinese puzzles, that's what it's like. You start to pull it apart and look at it from different directions, and it's, once you pulled it apart a little bit and it's broken, it's there and it's in components, the isolated components, how they go back together with the original thing makes no sense whatsoever. Out of context, it just doesn't work because it's that complicated. So it takes a lot of standing back and thinking and stitching together of ideas to actually see how it might work. And I think probably the quickest, easiest way to explain it, rather than going through these technical lists, which is it might be actually to go and look at this project's inspirations, which is we're skipping over the bit, the first four sections for academics and techie people there, and we'll get on straight to the real world. Well, how did you think of the idea? Well, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, gaining the right skills and thinking in the right manner, and managed to join some dots, because I wouldn't have thought of it otherwise. So that's the easier way of thinking about it. So actually, if I skip over here, we can go straight there. Right. So project inspirations. Yeah, okay, that's good. Now there's supposed to be another people going to join us at 2 o'clock. The difficulty is that you schedule meetings during British summertime and you say you want 2 o'clock, and then actually that's not, because we're not in British summertime anymore. And then you're on Zoom, and I won't bother you with more of the details. But anyway, there've been some confusion with the technology. So yeah, my first real twig about I ought to try and pursue this was when I started learning about artificial consciousness. That's what drove me to think, actually, I ought to investigate this some more. But that was more of a tipping point of, wow, that's clever. I could do something with that. Before I got to that, it was actually knowing what an idea of actually what life and death was, as it were, from a biological point of view. So you can think of life as being like a chain reaction, in fact, a series of chain reactions or a series of interwoven workflows. So, you know, one thing tips on another, tips on another, tips on another, comes round in a circle, tips on the first thing, and then it all balances and happens all at the same time, because, you know, it's a self-sustaining chain reaction. So what's death? Well, it's when the chain reaction breaks down and all of those little processes that are all working together and operating together and communicating together and passing information stop working, or they stop passing information to one another properly, so that the whole thing falls apart. You can think of it as being like a house of cards that, or back in the 70s, there was sort of shows where people did plate spinning. People talk about being plate spinning as multitasking. Well, life is, you know, under the covers, it's all about multitasking. There's stuff going on at all kinds of levels. And when the plate stops spinning, then that's death. So, yeah, that was a quick summary of, you know, it's not just me saying that. That was also what, I forgot, physicist, bloke in the wheelchair, was on his Netflix thing. So it's, you know, it's a widely held view of explaining a scientific interpretation of what life is. Actually, you could interrupt me with any questions, actually, if you want, at any point, seeing as there aren't that many of us. Yeah, life is actually more complicated than that, though, in that, well, you know, if you took a big knife and chopped up anything living and then used a magnifying glass, and, you know, you could I've forgotten what the name of it is, what anatomists do, where they disassemble people. Yeah, that is, oh, hello, my dad's there. That's nice. Hi, Dad. He's joined as mute. So, Dad, you're mute. So I'm the one that's talking. All right. So you know, you're very welcome. Right. Anyway, so that's kind of a definition of what life is as a multi-process thing. But, you know, if you chop a human up and look at the liver and then look at a magnifying glass, you go down to cells and nuclei and stuff. It's also a hierarchical chain reaction and also a highly embedded chain reaction. Because if you look at a cell, say, there's bits floating around in it, you know, that, you know, have names. You know, when you look at them under a microscope, there's a lot of structure there. So the structure, you could think of it almost like it's like a swimming pool with swimming lanes in. There's stuff going on in parallel all the time, and activities going on. So when we watch the Olympics, you see that line moving forward, showing where the world record is. Well, if you thought of that as being current time, then that's how you could describe parallel activity. That, you know, this history of the past has become constant, and there's the stuff in the future, and there's the here and now, and potentially, you know, the Olympic swimming lane swimming figures could actually chuck stuff at each other whilst they were swimming along. You know, they could communicate, and that's the kind of gist of what goes on in the body. That there are these swim lane type activities going on, but it's weirder than that, because, you know, you could think of a swimming pool that got swim lanes in, and a swimmer, but actually inside the swimmer there could be another swimming pool of swim lanes and activities. So it's hierarchical and embedded, very complicated stuff going on, and it, you know, progress of stuff as it happens over time. So, you know, as an ex person who studied biology, got to appreciate all of that stuff, and thought, okay, I understand how You know, there's that kind of view of how living things work. So then I turn up for work, and we start to think about how businesses are living things. Well, they're a lot more simple than human biology, but you kind of feed stuff in at one end, turn the handle, value is added to something or other, product comes out the other end, people make money. You know, there are lots of ins and outs from a business, but in a sense, it's again a multi-process plate spinny type thing going on. So there are parallels between, you know, our existence as a being and business as well, because if you described business in one manner and also described us, you could use the same kind of terminology to describe the two, which is cool and useful, because I did used to start working on a system that was used eventually for describing businesses. In fact, I helped facilitate that with the work that I was doing. Actually, I'm going to no, I'll carry on with describing that. So yeah, actually the next topic there is understanding time. We'll go back to understanding artificial consciousness and how that fits into the picture of trying to get a human like AI to work, because I read about that and then thought, oh, hang on, yeah, all the stuff I know, there's a whole bunch of extra bits that I can fairly easily throw into the mix, as it were, to make this stuff work. So I'll talk about the 3 bits that are missing from the artificial theory of consciousness that I heard about. Anyway, so understanding time. Well, you know, you ask people to understand the nature of time. Actually, I'm going to unmute my dad because everybody else is unmuted, and then hang on. Oh, I'll just need to, if I can. Yeah, because actually then everybody can unmute. I'm asked to unmute. Yeah, so you can press the unmute button, and so yeah, my dad can talk now. Everybody can talk. I've asked Jerome to unmute. Yeah, so you could all talk if you wanted to and ask questions. That's fine. Okay, right now, understanding time. How do we do that? Well, because we understand time before we can speak, actually understanding it now that we can speak is hard, because we don't have, you know, the vocabulary for it of you know, how do we experience time? Well, it's actually quite easy to understand, in that this software that I was working on, that I realized I wanted to use with this other software for artificial consciousness, was very good at understanding time, which sounds weird, but imagine you've got a felled tree that sort of, you know, was in your life, always lying from left to right, and that you kind of started at the root and could run along that tree, and you could take branches in life to the left or the right. Then the rules of this game are that you can't go backwards, because backwards is a constant. You know, that's how where you are is current time, and what's behind you in this sort of tree of life of decisions is historic constant stuff that you could look back on, but you can't change. You can't go back there, but you could review it, reinterpret the experience of it. So running along this tree of life, as it were, decision tree, people talk, that you know, you've got the choice of going left or right on a path, and you could predict, say, what might happen if you went left or right, and that's what your brain is really good at. And that actually what this technology is good at, that I had been working on when I learned about consciousness, artificial consciousness. So that sort of one of the aspects of that's cool. We've got software that can do this kind of stuff. Actually, I will in a bit. I'll show you some of that software so that you can see how it works. Actually, it probably makes sense to look at some of that first, if I can find it. Yeah, no, we'll go and do that on YouTube. Oh yeah, YouTube, discrete event simulation. Yeah, we're not going to play this whole video. Yeah, and I'm going to talk.
Today we're going to talk about discrete event simulation, a simple yet versatile way of describing a dynamic system. Simulations rely on a model of a real-world process to imitate time-dependent behavior. The discrete event approach models a process as a series of instantaneous occurrences, or discrete events. In between these events, the system is approximated as fixed and unchanging. We can illustrate this concept by developing a model of an elevator.
Actually, there's a whole raft of videos on YouTube, and I'm not sure that this is going to be that great a one. It's yeah.
I don't remember. Just
No, let's not go for that. Right, so yeah, let's try another one instead. I had looked at these before, and I hadn't. No, I should have found, I think, an example of one. Yeah. It'll take me a little while to find such a thing. This is one where these are the people I used to work for, Donkey's Back. Yeah, they which actually we need to find one that is less of a let me skip ahead. They've changed it since I've looked at it. Yeah, that's no good. Recently. So imagine a no, we'll find gee. Yeah, this is it. This will help. Simulation explained.
Visagi provides powerful simulation capabilities that enable organizations to make better decisions by visualizing the impact of proposed ideas and changes prior to implementation in a real-world setting. Visagi simulation is robust and easy to use. To better illustrate the advantages of
what I'll do is what they're using the software for is if you can imagine that this is a screen where they've been painting these boxes on that are describing something. The kind of stuff that they're describing is things like credit card application or a application for a mortgage or something like that. So there's this software, that's some drawing software, and you're pasting a bunch of different boxes on that you can see that they've stitched together, and there are different activity areas where people have there are call center agents that are doing receiving calls. They're not doing anything else, but in describing this particular process, they receive a call and then they pass it on to other people. So these are things that take an amount of time, and a decision is made, and stuff is passed on. Well, so you could describe the process of making something with this. So if you've got some raw material coming in through a door, and you could have over here, the goods in store where they went and put raw material, and then pictures of people carrying that stuff up to a saw where they chop it up and then they put it on a lathe, and out the other end they come up with tankards or something or other, in lots of different blobs of activity and timings and stuff. And now when so you could introduce a blob of stuff in this sort of design if it was something describing tankers, so that it would tell you how you could make a tanker come out of the one end of the other end. Now, if we took this kind of concept and instead of saying where it said assist query or whatever, you actually stitch together words like this. In a sense, words where it says assist query, if we thought of the word this, say, and then thought of the word this as like being like a virtual domino, like it's got dots on one end and dots on the other end. So the word this defines how it can be used. Like it can only be stuck after so many different types of thing and before so many different types of thing, because the nature of the word this defines its acceptable context, its kind of own reality, its meaning. So that being the case, I'm going to, there's a little bit of noise going on, so I'm going to mute where I think that's coming from, and then you can send me a message, Jerome, if you want to say something. Anyway, so we are now thinking about words as being processes, like where it says assist query. If we took a, I don't know, a question or a statement, I'm going to a party later. So I am going. So the word going, if you look it up in the dictionary, it's got so many different meanings. And if you were a linguist, you could know that in English it could go after so many different types of things and before so many different types of things. Now, obviously, understanding every language in a computer is going to be incredibly complicated. You need to start at the foundations and figure out how you're going to do that if you're going to make a multilingual human-like AI. But I believe we can, which is very cool and useful. Now, the reason for that is based on some theory, which I'll go on to. let's go back to my my screen. So we've understood a bit about time and how we can model time, and how there's this software that's used in manufacturing industry for describing factories. We've only actually seen a really simple one, but if you imagine those little kind of workflow type chain thing of stuff, you could have hundreds of them and plumb them all together and describe the activities of an entire car factory. I mean, that would be amazing. But actually, that is what people do. So that sort of on the left-hand side at the front end, you've got a pile of different things that you can feed into and change, and say that you know, if the availability of people change or people decide to buy different cars, what happens to your factory? And you can find out when you're going to run out of stuff, or the fact that you're not going to have enough people on a particular shift or stuff, you know, because this software is able to run through and as it were mimic the world, simulate the world, predict the world, and tell you stuff. Well, you can repurpose that kind of chain, that pipeline, that workflow, to instead have a sentence written out. If you're going to interpret written language, you've got the sentence, you drop the sentence into your software, and then you use the kind of current time pointer to process words as you go along. Now, I'll come back to that, because you know, I'm not sure that I've convinced you of this idea as yet, but you can see that, you know, as someone who's trying to think of how the hell would you do that on a computer, you know, that this was the start of something, really.
James.
Hello there.
It's Dad. I don't have the background to follow all of this, so I'm going to drop out. Or can you drop me out? I don't know how to do it.
Oh, well, just close the window and or power off your computer, and I'll mute you for now. All right.
Okay.
I may be able to drop you out. Oh, hang on. Yeah, there is a remove. Yeah, it's, you know, I will.
Thank you.
Bye. Right. Okay. Hopefully we won't have any other levers. Right. Right. So, so the other good thing about, after you've understood time with this software, is that you can also pause for thought and replay stuff. Now, it's kind of like being able to play with a video game where you've got a description of the world, like a design of the world to inhabit, and you're chucking in stuff at one end and you've got outcomes out the other. The outcomes you get are different depending on what you chuck in, because it's like a world template that's describing stuff, kind of like a video game. So you could, what's weird and useful about this technology, though, is that if you chuck stuff in at one end, then you always get the same answers out the other end. Now, of course, the real world in life isn't like that, but this is simulation technology, and it's designed to help us understand stuff, and it's doing some clever stuff in the background, and it's actually what we need, because when we're wanting to use an AI, we want it to always come back the same answer and be reliable about what it does, you know, rather than be affected by, you know, the daylight and how much wind there is or whatever, the random stuff. So the fact that you can rerun stuff. You can rerun stuff as though it's a film, so it's an actual recording, or you could rerun it with the same data and it would look like it was a film, but actually it's not. It's actually doing all the same calculations all over again and coming up with the same answers. That's actually quite difficult to do. The way that this system is doing that is important actually for the basis on which we're actually going to eventually use this system to mimic thought. The way that we experience thought, imagine we were on that tree running along, making the decision to turn left or right. You know, there were factors about that would interface, you know, that would influence our decision. People with guns, lions, fires, you know, an amount of data in various positions around us that would influence our choice. And, you know, based on our prior experience of people with guns, lions and fire, we'd, depending on the situation, make an easy choice to dash to safety, say. So now that would be an easy choice, but what happens if the lions and the fire and the gun-toting people all actually arrived at a different time and appeared at a different time? Well, that would influence your decision, of course, of whether to turn left or right. But if you turned up these places and they were all there all at the same time, you'd, as it were, pause for thought, weigh up the possibilities and decide to make that decision. The fact that you had seen the lions first, or the gun-toting people first, or the fire first, you know, in terms of taking in the whole scene and spinning around, you'd actually make your assessment based on a full assessment of all those three things. In the simulation world, that's the rule, and that is actually probably the way that things work in your mind as well. I mean, if the lions were actually very biting, very close to you, you'd focus on the lions and run away from them and not think too much about the gun-toting people and the fire. But actually, subconsciously, my belief, that you'd actually have had a full assessment. You'd have paused and taken in the whole thing, because that's actually the way that the brain works. And the evidence for that is if you were to play a trick on someone, say, you know, there they were driving home, and you were to move the door handle of their front door, you know, they wouldn't normally take any notice of the door handle. They just probably stick their hand out and expect it to be there. But, you know, we're wandering home, you know, we'll notice somehow that our bird feeder is empty, but we wouldn't normally pay any attention to the bird feeder. So we're taking in all of these subconscious assessments the whole time and popping the ideas into our head, into our consciousness when we need them. So this technology that we're going to need to understand the world and understand language needs to be able to support that. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that. So technically speaking, what actually is going on is that, as it were, we've paused at some event or other, and it's like we've hit the pause button on the video and we're taking an assessment of the world. That assessment of the world's based on when we last took an assessment of the world. You know, we're not actually in this system. What the way that it's working is that we're taking an assessment of the world as it is here and now, and you know, we are needing to make a decision and a choice based on that bundle of stuff. Now that capacity to decide about a bundle of stuff is really important. Being able to pause and do that, because it's all about the timing of information. Because if you imagine that bundle of stuff of information, you're wanting to deliver that somewhere else, so that some other part of a system, we'll call it human. Say you were passing information to your knee because you were needing to run away from those lions. You think about how much information there is going on that's controlling our knee. Is there just sort of one bit of information or an entire packet? You know, if the data from your brain got to your feet at the wrong time, you'd very soon fall over. So this ability to process information in packets and in the right time is incredibly important, because, you know, your knee wobbles a bit because you've lost balance, your foot wobbles. All of that information is getting passed back to the wobble control center, I suppose. We could decide that there was one of those. And we don't fall over from getting up, sitting. We're able to run away from the lions. Now, of course, in the past, there were people that failed to get up and did wobble. And those are the people that died and got eaten by lions, because that's the way evolution works. So, you know, the skill that we have for passing around chunks of information to make sure we don't fall over, that's very complicated, because it's all about wobbling the foot, wobbling the whole body, you know, the amount of muscle power that it takes to keep balanced, and oodles of different muscles, and then the running muscles and everything. It's incredibly complicated, and all of that information needs to get passed about with just the right timing. And if any of that plumbing was wrong, well, I guess cerebral palsy is an example of where that plumbing is wrong. And, you know, this is a disability. It's not a natural condition for humans. And on the plains of Africa many years ago, when we were needing to regularly run away from lions, the survivability of people with that kind of behavior would have been significantly reduced, obviously. But we grew the capacity to cooperate, which I'll come on to later. But we got that capacity to cooperate because we've been developing all of these plumbing abilities between all of these different processes. We've been able to pass information appropriately between all the different processes that are happening in our bodies. So when I said consistent global communication, that's what it's about, really. The fact that we're able to, as it were, sling a bag of data at our knees and our feet, or they're able to sling it back at us to the wobble control center, or whatever it is, or the muscles, and be able to pause, assess, process that whole lump of stuff, and then proceed. So that sounds really fundamental and important, and that's something I learned when I was learning about discrete event simulation. Well, statisticians and linguists and people also call that something called the Markov property. And I'm not going to, you can Google it and look at it on Wikipedia, and its description's a bit heavy going, really. But the fact that it exists and that it's something that comes up all over the place, it's very important. that is a lot of what is behind the basis of human intelligence, because actually this whole pausing and processing of information is something that we're able to do very well, because, for example, suppose we're understanding a word and we're thinking about it in terms of a limited context. There's a limited time frame that we'd think about that word. But actually, when we look at the bigger picture of what was said earlier, or what we've learned about a person a week before, or what we learned as a kid, we can widen the scope of our data assessment. This pause button, it's like we're playing with the totality of the information that we're assessing in order to make up our mind. We're kind of heading up a hierarchy of taking on more bigger models of what's going on in the world. So we're thinking about not just the word, the sentence, the whole paragraph, the person, and we can think about those models as being like these discrete event simulation models, which, you know, I've touched a bit upon, where based on past experience, they're designed to give us answers. You pump information in one end, you get answers out the other, and you know, based on prior experience, how things are going to turn out, what things are going to make sense. In a sense, we are able to predict the world based on our prior knowledge. Actually, with this kind of design, it suggests that we are very mechanical and lack free will, which philosophers think about, which, you know, we can... I'm not going to go into that, but I think it's a fair point. But I'm not going to discuss it. So that is why the Markov property is important, and why reusing and re-experiencing the Markov property, this pause and assess a bucket of information. You know, we're not interested in prior history. We're only wanting to know the here and now, the state of things now. Bearing in mind the state of things now, what decision do we need to make? But we could widen that by feeding that assessment up the hierarchy and asking the same types of question again. And actually, that is the process, this reassessment process, and this being able to feed information up a hierarchy and actually down a hierarchy as well. Because I described here about simulations being how you can assess multiple things happening at the same time. So, you know, we're looking at one context and we can kind of take a left turn and then think, actually, over here, there's some other stuff that's happening that's important. And I need to make a decision about that. So, in fact, I need to pause what is happening now, go and save that and come back to it later. Well, you can do all of that pause button in discrete event simulation. So it's a way of describing the virtual world, in a sense, and being able to reload past experiences, revisit, restart the gameplay. But actually also, because it's all built up by component-like experiences, you can dynamically create new explanations of the world. And this is what we need to do when we use language, because we think of words as being like templates. We've got in our mind the concept of the idea of the this. And when we actually experience this as a word on a page, say, it's as though in our minds we've taken that concept off the shelf, as it were, and you know, experience that this on the page, or we've recognized a this as being like a domino. It's got a particular context at one end, context at another end. It makes sense to us. But we're able to understand this because, you know, we recognize the characters, but also we're able to process it in our subconscious. Now, this is where we come back to when I finally thought, that's cool. That's the extra plumbing. And this is stuff that was missing from what I was knowing about previously. So I've covered the 3 points about understanding time and consistent global communication and being able to pause for thought. And then, yeah, so I've written it down somewhere in this about when this happened. I read an article in New Scientist about people who were creating artificial consciousness. Anyway, a lot of you are, Matt is not mute, and other people are currently muted. But has anybody got any questions? Yeah. In fact, the video's turned off, so they might not even be there. I don't know.
No.
He is there. Okay. Well, I'm glad you. Well, okay. I'm glad you are there, and that
I. Yeah, I'm here too. I'm just listening.
Okay. Right. Great. Okay. So no questions. I'll carry on. Yeah. So you can see, getting your head around this stuff. There's a great deal of plumbing, and it starts to lay out and make sense. Now, this work on artificial consciousness, I was really impressed by this. A very, very, very cool theory of consciousness. This is, yeah, we'll skip up over here. I mean, I use Wikipedia a great deal, and a lot of this is on Wikipedia, but also there's some very good tutorials by the people who've done this work. Yeah, and actually, yeah, if you go on the link to my Google page, you'll see, you know, in the editor here, it all looks really nice, and we've got these icons, and on the pages where I have footnotes, there are footnotes that appear here, but where you publish it to Google, to the web on Google Documents, all of that disappears and it looks horrible, and they've got extra bad formatting and stuff all over here, which is remarkable because in the computing world they talk about this being as what you see is what you get. WYSIWYG. Yeah, I think this was an idea. I think well, Apple were getting it right back in '87, and when I was using Apple Macs back then, and Google still aren't. So that's pretty appalling, really. Anyway, so apologies for how rubbish it looks. I didn't even bother looking to see what the Google Docs online would look like, and it's rubbish, which is pretty appalling. Anyway, off topic and back on to global workspace theory. Yeah, this is written out here. And what it is, of course, it is, again, very much multi-process stuff. What it does is it explains the ability for the consciousness, the human consciousness, to have a focused mind. So it's a partial explanation of consciousness. Yeah, I mean, I've highlighted, yeah, things that it doesn't include, but yeah. So what it we get the people right. Yeah, Bernard Bars came up with a theory, And you can actually look at his book online. There is an electronic version. There's a link to it in my write-up here. Cool book about what he calls global workspace theory, which, if you imagine a theatre where there you are, a member of the audience, you don't pay any attention to the other members of the audience, as it were, but you are focusing on what's happening on the stage. So your focus of attention is using your brain as a process to see what's on the stage. And you're kind of aware, semi-conscious, of the processes that are away from the focus of your attention on the stage. And you're also kind of aware of what's going on in the wings. So you're aware when people come and go, or when stuff goes in and out from the wings, or, you know, drops down on a swing if you're watching a panto or whatever. That's kind of what Bars's suggestion that consciousness is like. And then he says about how the fully subconscious is like the stuff that's happening behind the stage. So, you know, in his work, he sort of describes how there's all this multi-process stuff going on, and then a filtering infrastructure about passing information between these processes. And also, actually, this isn't in his book, but this is kind of, if you imagine the peak of consciousness as being like a, you know, the focus consciousness, our awareness as being like the root ball of a tree, as it were, and we invert that root ball underwater, very underwater. So the root ball is floating and it's above water, and that's consciousness. And then we go down further down into the branches and the leaves and stuff. Well, the branches and the leaves, that, you know, they're all buried down there, busily collecting experiences, or as I think it's, yeah, Stan Franklin in his tutorial. There are tutorials online, and I'll talk about those. So you can think about the leaves as being like sensors in our bodies, and that those are sort of bubbling information back to us. So there we are underwater, and there's this filtering process that actually bursts those bubbles or destroys those bubbles, so they never get to the surface. You know, some of those bubbles are getting processed and merged into bigger bubbles. Yeah, so that we're getting bigger perspectives out of all of these tendrils, these leaves. I suppose I could have talked about roots instead, couldn't I? But anyway, you see the gist, that there's this sort of amalgamation and processing going on that you know, as we're watching a theatre performance, there's all this other stuff happening in the background that we don't even bother noticing, which only comes to our attention when our filtering process is actually triggered, so that we're then drawn to what's important. So there's this fabric that's doing this filtering for us, and that is what is useful, and is able to draw our attention in. So that's the nature of consciousness. And if you Google these people, check out my links. There's a whole raft of IDA and LIDA standalone artificial conscious things built for the Navy, allegedly just for processing emails, or possibly for putting inside weapons, perhaps. Hopefully not. But, you know, that is what these people spend their money on, really. So, yeah, this could be the technology that's flying around inside those autonomous drones, potentially. Very clever stuff, but you know, it was the human choice to put it inside that autonomous drone. You know, it's not the AI's fault. you know, the AI itself isn't dangerous. It's in a sense like a tool, that it's like a knife or a gun that is perfectly safe until you give it to a 2-year-old, or a psychopath, or to someone who's choosing to you know, send to GPS coordinate and kill everyone, which is another, you know, AI type scenario. So, you know, the humans need to take responsibility for that kind of design decision. And my approach to AI, as is described in the article a bit more, is that we can make human-like AI rather than human AI, because there's a load of stuff that we don't want to put into an AI that's going to make it dangerous. You know, we don't want to give a human-like AI the concept of revenge or jealousy. It's what we want. Well, what I'm interested in producing it is something where it's going to understand and be able to grow in understanding of language, so that it can work as a robotic construction engineer. It can work in a team building greenhouses on Mars, and it's also going to be a personal assistant where it can keep us informed about the stuff that we're running short of on Mars and where we can get it from, because as it's a computer, it can look up all the geology reports and know where the reports of useful stuff will be to make more cement, which we're going to need, because we're going to run out in 3 weeks with all the greenhouses we're building. That's the kind of technology that we need. And that's a technology that if you could have a conversation with it, with your Alexa, and have Alexa, yeah, she's not working up, that's all right, actually understand you, and you could have a proper conversation with your computer. The Alexa would be more like a Star Trek computer of the old era, where the computer would say, could you clarify if it wasn't sure about what you were asking. So then, rather than just like typing Google and you type in a bunch of stuff, and now actually in Google it prompts you so that you get a better choice. So yeah, our talking AI needs to do that kind of thing, but better. And then actually, after it's presented you with the information, there are multiple contexts perhaps with the use of the words or question that you've asked, and then as with the Star Trek AI computer, it says 3 examples of what you've asked, and which one do you want to know more about, or how do you want the information presented? You know, do you more detail, less detail? You know, this is what we're wanting from the future of our AI, which sounds tremendously impossible now, but I don't think it is actually. It's not as far away as you would think, and the reason for that, which is cool, is that we have the ability to recognize what I'm going to call a language of thought. Yeah, here's a load of other stuff that I suppose what I could do is actually get, you know, we're there could have been other people starting to join us now, but they're not at present. But anyway, that we'll see. Does anybody want a break now? I've been talking for an hour. It might be time for
a coffee break.
Yes, or some kind of. Should we say back in? Oh yeah, back in 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Yeah, I mean I'll be back quicker than that. But if we say back, we'll restart at 10 past. And actually, what I'll do is I will put a note up here and say resuming in at 14:10 GMT. How's that? All right.
Yep. Sounds good. Back in 5 then.
Back in 5, yeah. Okay, everyone. Great. Right, I'm back sooner than that, but you can message me and tell me when you're ready. I'll have a bit of a drink. I'm going to mute myself briefly. It's tradition for a cat to come in to a Zoom meeting. Anyway, he's not standing on the keyboard. Instead, it's tail in the face. Joined by Julian Knowles. Right. Julian, you've got your sound switched off, but I'll talk anyway. We're pausing until 10 past to have a bit of a break. Realise there's been some time zone confusion over the start of this event because it was booked during BST, which then meant it was then reinterpreted as GMT, and it all went wrong from there on between Zoom and Meetup and stuff. Anyway, so we have started at 1 o'clock, everyone else, but I think actually, well, anyway, let's not worry about where we're at now. I'm just going to be checking with everybody and make sure that everyone is back. We haven't actually got onto the theoretical language of thought as yet. More just been talking about my write-up, which looks far better in the editor than it does on the link that you can access, where you know, it's all formatted nice and you get these fluffy icons and stuff. So Google are really failing at doing what computer scientists call what you see is what you get. Doesn't look like anything. Oh, Julian's left us. Okay, all right. Well, we could have talked. Anyway.
We're back.
You're all back. Okay, lovely.
Yeah, let's just come back.
Okay, right. Are you Jerome? Are you back? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, right. Okay. Oh well, let's go back to mute. That's great. Okay, let's carry on. Super. Right. Yeah, I've talked about consciousness and the discrete event simulation. There's actually something that allows you to plumb together multiple discrete event simulations called the Debs formalism. Some links that you click on, it says it involves doing two things. It's actually a much bigger concept than that. Yeah, let's carry on a little bit more about. Did we cover everything on consciousness? Yeah, I think we probably did. Yeah, so we talked about bubbling up and filtering and stuff. Okay. Yeah, so what we need to be able to do in order to get language to work is to be able to connect this kind of processing pipeliney stuff that we've been talking about back to physical reality. So you know, a real, I mean, all of this is happening in a virtual world, but a virtual world that could potentially be synced to a real world, and we could cut the link, as it were, you know, if we were unhappy with the way that our AI was working at some point, you know, because I'm interested in deploying an artificial mind into a robot. So how do we do that? Well, there's already there are simulation technologies out there. There's a type of simulation technology, two types being used with robots, which are referenced in my text by the Open Source Robotics Foundation. Okay, Julian is back and is connecting audio. Okay, Julian, we're going to carry on now, and glad that you're back. And there will be a video that I'll post on my blog that I'll explain about at the end. that hopefully you will see. Not sure quite where you came to from this, but yeah, I suppose I can visit my blog now, and you can see where you need to go for stuff on this project. Yeah, you wouldn't normally see that. That's my editor blog. Yeah, so HEMSEYE.org/WP/blogs. Loads of stuff here. Most recent one is about what we're doing at the moment. And I'll post a video at the end. And if you want to post comments too, that would be really helpful, because yeah, I mean, here this is where you can go to looking at the draft, which doesn't look quite the same, and then you kind of carry on further and further and further, and hang on, this formatting's wrong, and there's a bit of bold there, so that's what I was talking about, how stuff doesn't work too well on Google. Anyway, back in the nice editor where it looks nicer. Yeah, there's stuff that the Open Source Robotics Foundation have done with robotics going back a long while. Yeah, this is where they built a world and had these humanoid robots given a whole bunch of challenges. There's loads of videos on YouTube about what DARPA have done. And these aren't actually, these are in a sense scripted robots or autonomous robots, or more like if you've seen the film Avatar, where these are being driven by a user. So they're heading to be the construction robot that you can have on Mars, but and that's what some of them are in fact designed for. But they're not quite there yet. One of the things that they're not there with is they've not got the type of simulation that I've been talking about plugged into them, which is what you need in a virtual reality AI world in order to get this stuff to work. Now, the way their simulation works, actually, whilst I talk, let's no, yeah, you can see there's a whole bunch of cool robots, and I'll look at at YouTube for some DARPA type stuff. Yeah. Just as a quick peek. The obligatory advert. Yeah, you can see there they were.
A nasty spill yesterday that we know caused some structural damage to the robot. The stress is palpable because this is it. This is 4 years.
Let's have a look, see what they were doing. We can actually see them. If you look up DARPA, they do all kinds of exciting and sometimes dangerous stuff because they're military, basically the American military's research people. Anyway, very cool and impressive what they do. Yeah, let's get back to there. So that is using a technology that's called continuous simulation and physical simulation. So what that is that there's a clock and a model of a robot, and it's clocking every second. there's no, so then it knows how the robot should move. It's the kind of the technology that you get in autonomous cars, in that the autonomous car and that gazebo stuff knows how stuff moves, how stuff accelerates, where stuff is going to be, how, in the case of robots, how hard a pull you might need to do on a handle in order to open something, that kind of thing. How hard a pull you could safely do without breaking your hand, which is an important thing that is all part and part of what they're doing. So in order to connect that technology to the technology that I'm talking about, you need an independent clock that pumps into both, so that when we talk about events occurring, so when you're reading and you have the event of having just read this word, operate, we've had an event there. You know, we didn't need it to change color, but you know, we read the name operate, and that popped into our head. Our subconscious supplied us with the context of what that meant, and that I've highlighted it as a standalone thing. You know, we've not actually read, could an AI be made to operate and understand a simulation systems users interface? Systems user interface. Get onto that. So it's our subconscious that's popping in the meaning there. We're not actually having to think hard about that. Just the ideas arrive, that the bubble up and filtering clever stuff is happening, so that it's arriving without us even needing to bother. So by having an external clock that is able to link with that event experience with the physicality of some robot wandering around in the world, you can link my technology, the discrete event simulation, with physical simulation and continuous simulation. They're being used together. They've got clever math stuff, understanding physics about how stuff falls, and you know that's all the stuff they deal with you know, with words like acceleration and stuff like that, gravity, effects of gravity, like, you know, loads of maths for all of that, which we need if we're going to understand the real world. But the plumbing's already there. We can hook into it. So what's the plumbing called? Well, the plumbing's actually called, it's a networking technology, which you can read about, which I can never remember the chap's name. I was after, was the consciousness guys, Franklin and Bars, and I will come across his name, the chappie behind the devs formalism. Anyway, so there's been a lot of work on that, which means that physical robot stuff and the pipeliney understandy stuff, multi-simulation. So we're actually connecting 3 different sorts of simulation technology, because we've got one independent clock. Now I know, Matt, you work in networking, so the concept of having an external independent clock, a network clock, will be something that's familiar to you.
Yeah.
That is how the world was working, and we just didn't know it. It's all, you know, the clever stuff that former geeks have done for us. And it's okay to be thought of as a geek now, because you know, all the geeks have done so much stuff that we don't get picked on so much anymore, like we did back in the 70s, because of the internet. Anyway, so we've understood about the Markov property. Now, yeah, here's a bit of a crux then. If we're going to understand language and use this this plumbing we've been talking about. We've got 3 different sorts of simulation technology all working together. That's not going to work unless we have like a virtual world observer AI thing with a focused attention that is able to create discrete event simulation models for us. They've got to be able to take charge. Well, we've only actually seen one type of discrete event simulation user interface at the moment. I kind of inferred a bit, gave you a little bit of a look at one. Actually, the Biagi one that I started playing a little while ago, that it uses a technology called business process modeling notation, and that's the stuff about connecting things like mortgage applications to this underlying technology that was originally developed for the manufacturing industry. So when you originally looked at this discrete event simulation technology, it didn't look like that at all. It had got stuff on like conveyor belts and autonomous cars and hooks for hanging car parts on that went along cables and stuff like that. And you know, you can see that kind of thing in the Lana Group website that I was visiting earlier. Yeah, because when I worked for them, what I did was actually write the specification, the initial specification for changing the user interface, replacing the user interface of this manufacturing thing with a business general finance user interface thing. So you think of it as being like slicing the layer off a cake. You know, we've sliced the user interface off, added a new one instead, but the base stuff is still all the same. Well, there's precedent. We've done it once already. Well, I wrote the spec, and then people with me, I did some of the development, but you know, there's a whole team of us worked together on producing this tool that allowed donkeys years ago now, originally, a technology that allowed people who wanted to do business process modeling to connect to simulation engines, as it were, discrete event simulation engines. So that's the clever stuff that's happening in the back room somewhere, as it were, that's doing this ability to pause time and predict time and calculate the cost of things, because it does all of that as well. Discrete event simulation, you can do whatever maths you want on any of these processes and figure stuff out. So we have precedent for replacing user interface for a simulation system, and we could have an AI use it. Well, the reason a computer can't understand discrete event simulation is because of our human prior knowledge. So we'd have to add layers of information so that an AI knew the what and the where and the why and the how of stuff, the cause and effect of stuff. Because actually, when you look at what discrete event simulation is doing, it's actually describing cause and effect. You know, it's the flow of information of what happens, outcomes and stuff. So we've got a technology that is providing us with the ability for getting AI to understand cause and effect. That's a big tick for AI, because nobody knows how to do that. Well, we've got an existing solution here and precedent for making it work. So there's a technology that allows us to build up knowledge of stuff that I'm saying you could paste onto a document like this, as though, you know, it could be, you know, if this was a simulation engine, you know, that could be an instance of the word could as a simulation element. And that's another instance of the word and, which is there in context. Now, when we're plumbing those together, we need to understand how to use those, and also anything else, we need to understand it. In effect, we have a simulation model in our minds of how to plumb the word and could and this and whatever together. We've got, as people call it, metadata description. We've got an about, so set of instructions. So in our simulation model of an, we need to provide that additional information. So there's a lot of work involved in doing this. And in fact, it would seem like it should be an impossible task. But as I will come on to later, it isn't, because remarkably, there's something that, the people who did the research don't call it a language of thought. Somebody else calls it a language of thought, but that's actually what it is. And it's a set of 62 words, actually concepts that are universal to all languages, that technically and artificially, at least, you know, if you take those 62 words and start writing out dictionary definitions with them that are very lengthy and artificial potentially on occasion, but are perfectly valid and correct, you can actually paraphrase any concept. Yeah. So that is weird and incredible. What we're talking about is that there are 62 words that are in effect like the world of chemistry's periodic table, or the world of mathematics' operators, you know, the plus minus divide. Yeah, this is the sand and cement, the you know, and everything else, the basic materials of construction. So if you've got those tools, you've got the capacity to compose knowledge, compose a representation of knowledge. Well, that is, you know, it's remarkable. So I'm claiming that is technically possible. Yeah, I mean, I've been a software engineer since I don't know when. Over 25 years. It's what I do for a living. I deliver stuff on time to budget. So I'm pretty confident, and I've spoken to software engineers in Brighton when I've described this stuff. Managed to convince them. I think I'm going to manage to talk you through this more quickly than I did with them. That this is actually technically possible. But this is just me talking, and I've got no budget, and it's a hobby. I want to do it as open source and Creative Commons, which means that people who are going to want to make money out of this will need to behave like Red Hat and with Linux and stuff. Now, the reason it's Creative Commons and open source is because it needs to be in the public domain to keep it safe. And it needs to be Creative Commons because that creates potentially legally a community of people who are able to control the data that is associated with creating AI. And if we can control the data, then we control access to that data. And then if someone is doing something judged to be inappropriate by the international community of people who control this stuff, which will be hopefully a large bunch of international people interested in ethics, they can pull the plug and say, no, you can't use our data anymore. We deny you access. So this is in part how it is kept safe. When the technology itself is safe, it's just can be made safe in the same way that you don't accidentally make a flying car, as I mentioned previously, by accident. Never happens. The use is dangerous. So if someone is choosing to take the technology and do things like send a GPS coordinate and kill everyone, the community may well, hopefully, my vote is no, you can't do that. We're going to pull the plug. You can't use this technology, can't use our data to do that. Right. So we're getting closer to talk about the nature of the language of thought. Where to start? Should we build a human-like AI? I'm going to skip over that. There are some people who claim that the only valid AI is stuff that's built from artificial neurons, which aren't much like real neurons at all, because they're digital as opposed to analog, and they're not incredibly highly connected, whereas in the real world they are. Whereas all I've been talking about is very much biologically inspired. It's functionally biologically inspired at a greater level in terms of being able to mimic the knee joint, mimic the capacity to stand up straight, all kinds of things. So, yeah, people will argue with me over that because it's a common argument, but it really doesn't make any sense. I'll skip over this. There is a relationship between discrete event simulation technology and machine learning and deep learning and calculus, which I'll leave, but essentially the mathematics of discrete event simulation are in effect a bigger bag of tools. They're a superset. If in order to do machine learning and deep learning, you'll have pulled some tools out of the bag of discrete event simulation. Yeah, which means that if you want to scale up and make machine learning and deep learning more powerful, more relevant, and more usable in the real world, you have to add the missing bits that you took out, that you didn't take out of the toolbox that is in discrete event simulation technology. Now, I'm not going to describe the theory of that, but it's about the nature of data increments and time increments and stuff like that, and event increments. This actually, I've already covered my understanding of the basic biology of which human-like intelligence exists, my realization of how our brains are run on a partially Markov compliant hypergraph. Yeah, that doesn't, it's not an easy phrase. Actually, I'm not sure it is a partially Markov compliant. I've been thinking about this again, and it may actually be a fully Markov compliant hypergraph. The trouble with this, I've explained these things simply, but the wording of actually Markov and stuff, when you look at it, oops, isn't that friendly. And I'll leave that because I'll start having to use long words that just mean the same thing as what I've said. And we don't need any of that, long words. I've used long enough words as it is. Anyway, let's skip on. And no, actually, if we go back, then yeah, so we've covered project inspirations, and now we've got how do you get computers to learn and understand languages? Right. Well, yeah, there are different ways of trying to explain this. I'm on the member of a website where called Academia, where they keep sending me emails actually that are trying to get them to join, because academics get to join for free. And what's really nice, somehow by accident, because I'm in no way qualified, they've asked me to comment on someone's research paper, and so I've started drafting something to them, because what they're trying to do is really cool, but actually their understanding of it is overly simplistic, because my model here gives you a far better answer. And what this is my draft. I'll refer to this actually a bit in talking some more. They're trying to understand how the experience of phenomena leads to us to having conceptual awareness of ourself and our consciousness. And that they're suggesting that is all wrapped up in sort of one thing, that our self-awareness and our intelligence is like a series of increments that we've got building up to be able to understand ourselves and consciousness. And anyway, I won't just talk about more about what they're getting wrong. I'll more talk about what I think is the case. Anyway, yeah, as a sort of after I've been thinking about this, I won't talk about this in terms of how it came to me, but in terms of the evidence. There's this guy, Michael Tomasello, who did the very sensible thing of sitting down and comparing the behavior of great apes and baby humans and try to figure out why they're different. Because, great apes aren't noted for their great capacity for conversation. So what's different? There was a whole raft of observations of things that they've done differently. There's a write-up of his book, one of his books that you can see from the publisher, where some of the stuff is written up of things that he does in terms of the nature of learning and all kinds of detail. But the summary of what he says is that the difference between great apes and us, and why we have language and they don't, is that he describes what we have as a capacity for what he calls joint intentionality. I'm going to carry on talking and disappear out of view at the moment because twist around. Yeah. Oh, we can't show just how scruffy the room is. We're in the process of moving stuff around. I'm going to put a pullover on. Did everybody still hear me with that? Yeah, probably you did, because I'm cold.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Right. Anyway, joint intentionality. Well, actually, what does that mean? Well, okay. So this is means that we're going out on a party to find some honey, or to dig up some roots, or to kill some furry animal and eat it, perhaps, or build a shelter, look after a little human or an elderly disabled human. Yeah, all kinds of society type stuff that we're able to do. So you could start to try and do those tasks without language, but having language obviously would make the whole thing a great deal easier, which Tomasello argues is why language, the evolutionary pressure, people call it a selection pressure. Won't bother explaining that, but it's something you might want to look up if you're not familiar with it. So it's the reason why better speakers survive, because being able to talk and be part of a society where you can look after young children, eat furry animals better is going to be a good thing. So yeah, I reword his joint intentionality with actually empathy. The empathy is actually you know, the capacity to look at somebody else's perspective, to look out from your own world as an observer, and cooperate for the benefit of yourself and others. So then we need to think, well, how do you construct empathy? What's the tool set of empathy that you're going to need before you're going to launch your evolutionary descended relatives into being able to have language? So, you know, you've got so far with an amount of empathy. What is it that you've needed to have in your head in order to achieve a level of empathy? Well, there's going to be a bunch of concepts and stuff, you know, that you've acquired since, you know, your earlier relatives were an amoeba or a mud skipper climbing out of the swamp. So there'll be a capacity, pre-verbal capacity, to interpret experiences, make sense of them. And if you start thinking about the real basics of language and look at dictionaries actually, and ask, what are the difficult words to define, or what are the words that are at the base of the pyramid, the inverted pyramid of language, as it were? You know, the blue touch paper stuff. You know, if you don't know, yeah, I mentioned this actually. Blue touch paper, it's described on the instructions of a firework. It's the thing that you set fire to, because it says on the sides of a firework, light blue touch paper and stand well back. So it's the thing that gets stuff going. It's that little bit of extra that you need to get something to start. So we're needing to find the equivalent of a blue touch paper in order to start developing a cascade of knowledge. So that's going to be a bunch of brick-like component things that we will have acquired over time. And thinking about those, you know, because in order to be empathetic, it'll be concept words like I and you and me, and object words like space and up and then this and there, over there. But actually there, this and there, that's actually an English concept, because in a lot of languages, this and there are used as the same thing. You know, they don't overcomplicate things about the fact that you know, it's still a pointy meaning of something. It's a derived meaning of this. Similarly, them, many languages, them, this, there, it's all this. So we're not after understanding all of the concepts. We're understanding the underlying concepts of things, you know, the thought of stuff, the fact that we can point at an object and we're going to call it this, although in English we sometimes call it other stuff as well. So there must be a bunch of those ideas that are at the base of the dictionary, which when you define them, get defined by other words that just bounce you back, like there are aliases. The definitions make no sense, because if you look at the definition for up, it doesn't mention gravity and the normal position of the top of something in relation to gravity. The definition's rubbish. The reason for that is because it's written by a linguist who is trying to use words rather than an experiential process modeling description of the nature of reality. You know, they're using the wrong tool set for those very difficult words. So how big is that tool set? You know, those very difficult words. Fortunately for us, there have been a bunch of people that, as it turns out, have identified them for us. Because I was thinking about all of this and thinking about, you know, how this has got to be so. So I got onto Google and managed to find some stuff that have weird names, because you would have thought that it would have the name the language of thought, but it doesn't. This stuff is called semantic primes and natural semantic meta-language. In fact, the natural semantic meta-language, it used to be called lingua something or other as well, some Latin name, because the lady who came up with it was, you know, she understood Latin, and she was wanting to talk to other European linguists with her original work. Well, then she moved to Australia, and she started talking with people over there, and they started contemplating a lot of different languages, and so that they started calling this way of using languages natural semantic meta-language. I would have liked them to have called it the language of thought instead. There is somebody else who came up with the same kind of idea that they were working on, except rather than working as a linguist, this person is a philosopher, and they're working in America, pre-internet days. Anna Wiezbeica, I'm probably saying that wrong, Polish woman, came up with 14 words originally, and that was back in 1972. Well, this other chappie from, I think it was from Stanford, anyway, from America, Jerry Fodor, who's written up in the world of philosophy as the person who knows about and is the leader on the language of thought. There's no mention in the Stanford website, an encyclopedia of philosophy, of the concept of using the semantic primes. It's Wiezbeica's original work plus a load of other people's work now as a language of thought. But that is what it was originally envisaged as. It's kind of been taken a different track and you've lost me now, promoted as a different thing now. But it's something that we, yeah, it is the same idea, essentially. Anyway, what in my write-up that you can read about what the semantic primes are. Let's have a quick butch as to what that means. I guess I'm not sure where Jerome is from, or Julian, in fact. So me saying
I'm still here.
Okay, yeah, I may be using some English terminology or potentially some Midlands terminology that my wife doesn't understand even, because, you know, we have regional vernacular, which is just interesting. Anyway, yeah, so this is a web page of what the semantic primes are. And yeah, if you read the original work by Anna Wiezbeica, she was trying to come up with words that were essentially pre-verbally understood and universal. And Cliff Goddard, in a later article, he only actually lists 11 that he believes have evidence as being able to be understood pre-verbally, because as someone who wasn't an expert in psychology, he didn't feel he was able to consider whether it was possible to say that these could all be understood by a pre-verbal child. Well, you know, let's go through them. I, you, someone, people. Well, pre-verbal kids, very social beings. They do have eye contact. They pass something called a mirror test, which I'll describe in my write-up, and it's actually also a rouge test, where they're able to recognize in a mirror that, hang on, somebody's put something red on me and I'm recognizing me. But so they're not only recognizing a sense of self, but they're recognizing other people. You know, a pre-verbal child is incredibly entertaining and wanting to socialize, even though so they're having the ability to recognize I and you. This is something actually that when you come to model the idea of language, there's concepts of we're getting on. Actually, no, we're all right for 3 o'clock. We're I think we're good till 4. Or actually, maybe we ought to think about another break now. How are people thinking? Is another break for another take 5 a sensible move at this point? Hang on, you're all on mute at the moment. Can you, Matt? What do you think?
Could do. I suppose I could get another coffee.
Right. Okay. Oh well, actually, on my we've got. Let's have a short break, and we'll be back at kind of 2 minutes past or so. So 3 minutes past. That's a 5-minute break. Okay, and then we can talk about other philosophical stuff and Hegel, who's almost impossible to understand. Anyway, but not when you have explained to you. All right. Right, I'm back. Could you call in to say when you're back?
Matt's just running downstairs. I'll let you know when he's back.
Ah, okay. Thanks, Ellie. Quick bit of editing to add some more stuff. You there, Matt?
He's just back in the room. Give him a moment to get his headset on.
Wow. Julian, Jerome, are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, I'm back.
Great. Okay. Right. Lovely. So, yeah, if we're going to get an ability to understand a sense of self and language and stuff, we're going to need a way of getting our AI to think about stuff. Yeah, I'm going to show you some pictures in a bit. See that one there? That's actually something weird called a Cartesian theatre. Why they call it that, I don't know. But I'm going to talk about some other stuff first, if I can manage to keep the idea in my mind. Now, yeah, describing here about how you need to create a user interface for a human-like AI. Well, what are we going to need? Imagine a virtual world where there is a virtual AI figure, human-like figure in a room that is able to play video games. So the screens in the room, you know, the single screens, multiple screens, or in fact the whole room could become a glass box. And you know, there they are with various game controllers or whatever knobs and switches to play stuff with. Now, in this room, you could also, as a human being, virtually arrive and get yourself seated next to this human embodied AI. Now, actually, within this room, it isn't actually. This is a space where this AI, this is the AI's mind. That, you know, it in our experience, like it's inside our head, as it were, and that they're playing video games out onto a world that could be a real world, could be imaginary world. It could be a world that's actually synchronized with our world. It could be, you know, their own virtual world. But from the AI's perception, it doesn't know what the nature of the world is. I mean, all it knows is that it's either what it perceives as real, which might be some test world that we've created for it, or it might be our world. We don't tell them which is the case. Or it could be where they've got multi-screens up and that they're running in their minds the real world plus additional worlds where they've perhaps cloned what they're calling the real world and running some other scenario in it, or looking at the world in some other perspective, as though you've shifted a game controller and you're looking at your game player from a different perspective, as you can do in video games. So by being able to do that, you can multi-perspective view the experience of being in the world. So you're heading towards being able to obtain empathy there. You know, you've got part of the tool set, as it were, to be able to do that. That's good. And also you're in a sense, by being able to sit next to an AI's mind, its sense of consciousness in this enclosed room, you're in a sense the small voice of consciousness, or the small voice of a trainer direct into the mind of your AI. And your AI is in this room, and you know what it gets up to, what it does is in that room. You know, there's no way for the AI to hide. This is where it exists. Everything that the AI is doing is built up from these discrete event simulations, which are all pumping out logs of information that you can audit and rewind back through and run again. You can run the same conversation with your AI as though you were there in a film, as we've discussed previously. So that's like video gaming technology, thoroughly and totally doable with what people are doing already. But actually, that really chimes with what a famous chap once came up with. And yeah, the two things of importance on theories of self. I mean, he actually wrote it out originally in French, but we know it in English of I think, therefore I am. So you gain a sense of self by having a capacity for attention, as it were, a capacity for awareness, a capacity for focus. Well, as we've already seen, there is a capacity for focus that's possible with artificial consciousness, this global workspace theory. Cool, big tick, already there. And then he's got this Cartesian theatre where we've all kind of had this experience, perhaps, of thinking that there might be a little man inside our head, or a little woman, little person. Sorry, Ellie. That's fiddling with knobs and stuff and deciding what happens. And in fact, it's more than that, in that this virtual human being inside our heads, as it were, can decide with in effect, they have an awareness of their own arms, and then decide, well, I'm going to put my arm over there, I'm going to be over there, and the on-screen body, as it were, that they're observing out on the world, then does that movement. You know, we think ahead from this observer position and get stuff to move for us. So that works then. So is there, it doesn't work brilliantly, because actually then you can actually ask the question, well, what's actually inside the head of the person that's inside our head? And of course that then gives you a trail where it goes on forever. So it only works this far and no further. But we realize that there isn't actually someone sat in a chair watching a screen. But when you look at the actual real physicality, you know, the mapping of experiences into the world to what actually is inside our brains, you know, where the nerves all stitch up. This is another picture. This is that picture actually of the little person, sometimes referred to as a homunculus. This is an imaginary tiny human, which you know, has got a long history of being talked about in mysticism. But you know, we've moved on from that, and there's a homunculus theory of mind, which, as it turns out, is partly true, because if you look at how nerves map into the brain, there is a sort of a body representation that looks a bit scrambled, but you know, it's all there. So this stuff gets mapped into our brain, and then it's getting off channeled somewhere else, so that we're actually able to do the job that we kind of experience as though it's happening like this picture, but it really isn't. Anyway, then there's this guy who's written books, number of books, Hegel. Wouldn't recommend anybody read him or dip into him, or actually, if you do, there's the phenomenology of the mind. I've got that. And he was actually in 1807 thinking about, in effect, a discrete event simulation engine, I think. But he was thinking about the nature of consciousness and the fact that, in a sense, I won't read it out, but in a sense that you need the whole eye and perspective and bundle of abilities that mean that what you end up with is, in a sense, a layered sense of the world, where if you think about that picture above, you've got the in the mind room, the my body. We didn't talk about that, but if you play video games, you can see that your sort of arms are at the sides of the screen. They kind of wrap in, and you can tilt the game controller down to look at your feet and stuff. So, you know, we have an experience of our bodies by the fact that from inside our heads we can see our bodies. So that's another layer heading out towards the world, and then there's the world out there of object. Well, with this kind of observer perspective, this is actually something that we need in order to understand language, which you know, people have spent a long time debating, really. But actually, pre-verbally, you can understand that when we start talking about the concept of I, linguists call this the subject in English and many other languages, well, that's the concept of then we're doing actions, where we're doing actions taken with my body. So this is the verb bit of stuff. And the world, where we're doing stuff out there to things in the world. This is the object. Well, yeah, I mean, when I was at school, when the teacher started talking about subject, objects and verb, it all became very frightening, because I got no idea what they were on about. But actually, it's an inherent part of our consciousness and part of our sense of self and sense of identity, and that this whole package of stuff is needed to be able to sit in front of a mirror and know that me is me. And here I'm just talking about how you know, we have the concept of I and my, but also in the reverse direction, which there's another picture underneath here. Or maybe, oh, that's in a different draft. I'll have to get that in there. Anyway, there's another one in the reverse direction where there are two others. I need to include them, where you've got the concept of you and me, where some other person is doing the action and is doing something to me, you know, as the object. And then you can actually wrap the whole thing up. So again, as an observer, where the I in these two blobs where I've got actions and the world, you can actually contain I, my, and the world, or you, me, and the world, so that we can imagine ourselves. We can do the third party understanding of stuff. So Hegel, a German bloke, never writing a summary of what he just said in any of his books, writing in German, so the verb appears at the end, so that the rest of us who don't think like that find it really hard to understand, came up with this in about 1807. Yeah, it didn't have any computers in mind, but you can see that kind of makes sense. The you know, we need the whole package in order to get things. I'm going to flip over Hegel on truth, because yeah, there's a trend in philosophy about people talking about the predictive mind, but none of them know about discrete event simulation. So I'm going to email and tell them about this, because all these philosophers have got theories about stuff that, you know, happen on paper, But as you've seen above, with virtual reality, we can make their theories real. We could even give them tools so that they could play and do their own particular things in creating philosophical concepts and representations and ideas and experiments and models, and make them executable as though they were, well, they could be made part of reality by making a digital twin of virtual reality and our real world and linking the two together, so that what's within an AI's mind is actually synced with the reality. There is technology out there for doing that already. Right. Friston's free energy principle. Has anybody heard of that? Probably not.
Nope.
Sorry, no? No? Okay. Yeah. Essentially, what he does is that he says that the biologist's plan is to minimize surprise. And the maths involved in doing this is horrendous, apparently. But if you're using discrete event simulation and you draw pictures, the maths all disappears from being complicated, and it's easy. Now, Friston's free energy principle about theories of mind, people talk about the computational theory of mind. When you have the ability to do discrete event simulation stuff, actually becomes trivial and actually overly simplistic. I mean, he in his theory hasn't actually explained, as I explained previously, the nature of and the importance of a Markov compliant hypergraph for reviewing thought and understanding of language. In fact, yeah, I don't know whether we'll have time. Yeah, no, well this is actually, that hypergraph is actually a mechanism by which we can represent human consciousness and human knowledge of current truth, the current state of the world. It's in effect the data structure that is in effect the house of cards that the brain constructs, as I describe in a write-up that I'll send to these academics. That we need to think of this hypergraph that we've talked about. This is massively interconnectedness. You know, we all know that the brain is massively interconnected. This Markov hypergraph I talked about earlier is a mechanism by which we can see that the structure of the brain really makes sense, because we're going to need it in order to construct a Markov hypergraph. Oh, right, that's probably relevant then, because we're trying to describe human intelligence. So we then might be tempted to think that the brain's structure, all these connections, are actually responsible for our consciousness. But of course, you know, you can't actually reboot the brain very well. So there's more to it than that. The consciousness, I think, is more contained in the chemistry of the brain. So it's more like a house of cards where you can knock it slightly, the whole thing collapses. It won't reboot. You can't hit the pause button. You can't stop it. So we're a lot more fragile than an artificial discrete event simulation where we can rerun things. Anyway, yeah, I explain that a bit more in this this passage to these academics that I've want to correspond with. So we're heading to developing a system where we are going to be able to think as an observer of the world back to our semantic primes, you know, space. Well, we were probably in the womb as a conscious being observing out the world and thinking, yeah, there's stuff over there, I can poke it. Time. Well, you know, is there any chance that a pre-verbal child doesn't have an idea of time? Well, they have memories and they can recall stuff. Well, of course they know about time, life and death. Well, yeah, maybe not at first. Kind or part of thing. Well, they pick stuff up and chew on it and chuck stuff about. And of course we know about kind of good and bad, definitely. Don't need English to, you know, language to know about good and bad, big and small. No way. So you can review all of these and decide that all of these words are capable of being understood by a child. Well, okay, so how are they understood? Well, I'm saying they're understood because they're understood in virtual reality, because they're understood in the space in which we exist. Yeah, there's this website that I've talked about, Wiezbeica and Cliff Goddard. Learn these words first. This is a website developed by David Bullock, which if you look at the research behind this dictionary, yeah, there he is describing what he's done, and he refers to Anna and Cliff and what they've done. So you can read up about that if you like. And he describes how this is a website designed for teaching second language to people who are trying to learn English. And he's teaching them visually. Well, our pre-verbal experience was a visual experience. And he's teaching people in an order, word order that is suited to people who are second language learners. But actually what I want to do is I want to take this and turn it on its head and use it as a mechanism of training artificial intelligences. We can look at the pictures, the conceptual pictures that explains the word see. So artificial intelligences have an ability to interpret and match symbols and pictures and stuff. So, you know, if we were going to use this as training data for our artificial intelligence, the concept of boy, when you think of person, you know, what some picture will appear in your head. Well, we can have Tony here appear in our AR head, or Lisa if it's a girl. And I don't know what all these languages are. I guess that's Arabic. That's probably, oh, that would be French, Chinese. Don't know. Anyway, so these are common concepts between these languages. So that's a way to teach an AI language. But actually what you need to do as well is look at the definitions, because the word see, you know, there's that experiential input there. I think see is probably one of the semantic primes actually. Yeah, it is. Okay. So this is part of our initial bootstrap. So this is the handcrafted stuff. We have to handcraft 62 things. Now, people will be in uproar to say that you can't do that. You have to get it to acquire all of its own understanding. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you go ahead and take that approach. You start with amoebic-like intelligence, and I'll cheat and figure out 62 models of stuff. And we'll see who manages to produce something that might be close to delivering an AI that would be suitable to go and do stuff on Mars. Yeah, you're starting at the amoeba and having to work through millions and millions of years worth of evolution. Yeah, good luck with that. Okay. From an engineering perspective, the argument makes no sense whatsoever. There's nothing wrong with a blue touch paper. They've been used on fireworks for thousands of years, and we're just replicating the same. So there you go. Yeah. So learn these words first. So, yeah, well, it's got a weird description. Multi-layered dictionary for second language learners of English. So what actually is one of those? Well, we're revisiting an idea that I introduced earlier, which is cool. Which, yeah, the person who came up with the phrase "language of thought" said that what the language of thought needed to be. This is Jerry Fodor, whose work was after Anna's, but came up with a better name. He said that the language of thought has to be compositional. Well, there's more research behind here, and I've hinted at it previously, but what he is saying is that, oh yeah, here it is, the semantic molecules. Yeah, so the semantic primes are the 62 things that we have to bootstrap, and then we've got definitions potentially of the semantic molecules that are in a dictionary that are definitions by you and using the semantic primes in this dictionary. That's how this dictionary is designed. Everything is designed ground up from the semantic primes. Yeah, so the semantic primes here are the foundation on which any concept can be defined or described. Now, these semantic molecules are things like mother and parent and stuff, which you can describe with the semantic primes as like, you know, the social role of mother and so on. But it's a bit theoretical. It's a bit tenuous. I think it was, well, this claim was more after Cliff Goddard was involved, and I think there's been quite a bit of criticism of the idea. But actually, if you think of it, that this class of simplistic extra stuff that you really need to know is, you know, in a sense, a set of simulation models that I'm hoping that you can automatically acquire, but there may be some editing required in order to acquire those into our AI that understands language. So these are things that they're called molecules because they're made up of the semantic primes. So they're constructions of those elements. So once you've got past those words, the assessment is, and it's actually similar in other dictionaries. Actually, here it says 2,000 words. You need to be able to get up to modeling 2,000 words in English, and once you've understood the base 2,000 words, we're thinking about vocabulary now as an inverted pyramid, where, you know, the inverted point is the blue touch paper, the semantic primes. We've edged our way up about this expanding pyramid, inverted pyramid with the molecules, and we end up with about 2,000, hopefully with some automation, and then we're then able to acquire and understand 80,000 words in this dictionary automatically. And there are people who've worked, sensible people who have worked about dictionary identification, and I'll need to be contacting them saying, here you people, do you want to think about this? This would be a good idea. If you had a virtual system for doing these kinds of experiments, the people you've been doing stuff for the last 20 years, you could do more stuff and explore more ideas that are bigger and more challenging in virtual reality. But I won't go into those. Right. Going on for quite a long while now. I'm going to have a bit of a roundup. I'm going to show you the semantic meta-language, because we've looked at the semantic primes and talked about them quite a bit. Yeah. This is a bit weird, actually. It says intranet secure. So I wonder whether this is a bit of a foible from this university, because it's not the intranet at all. It's the website. It's the World Wide Web. Anyway, never mind. It's nice we can see this stuff. It's very useful. Now, this isn't very readable, but it's designed to be printed as A3, apparently. So these are the semantic primes. And what you have to remember them is that these are written up in English. There are on this website other versions that are written up in other languages. And you know, you might read stuff here. Let's have a look. That you think, hang on, there's stuff missing here, because if you look at this, it being the semantic primes, it's looking at them in terms of the conceptual definition of the semantic prime use of the word this, which, you know, if you look back in the original definition of that semantic prime, I'm seeing and saying that this is actually the pointy object word that actually includes them and these and those. So I was talking earlier about language context and universal grammar. Well, this is the foundations. This is the universal grammar associated with this periodic table of concepts. Yeah, this defines the domino sticky ends of the word this. You can only use this in those means. It doesn't make any sense outside of those means. So in modeling these 62, what you have to do is define a mechanism of being able to identify those scenarios. And I've talked about boxes. I think I'm going to head for closing at this and wait for questions, where there's a concept of something called a Skinner box, which hasn't got a good heritage, actually, because it's something historically that people chose to design things to try to train homosexuals out of not being homosexual anymore, which really isn't very nice. Anyway, I'll set the situation up. Imagine this rat is really our AI, and also potentially us, you know, sat in this virtual room that is this AI's mind. And we're being faced with a pre-verbal contextual situation where we are having some sensory experience, which means that we've only got a limited set of options of what we can do in order to interpret the situation that we're in and get the reward that is out there, as it were. Then we can use this idea because it marries up in virtual space, like being the levers and knobs and the context and the experience on screen or in the glass box out onto the world, where we are, you know, in David Bullock's world of multi-layer dictionary, that there are constructs that we can recognize for many people. Lisa, seeing many people there. Yeah. So in the 62 semantic primes, we can take all this plumbing and think of it as being like a Skinner box. But of course, this is a Skinner box that doesn't actually physically exist. It's a virtual educational pre-verbal experience that's taken that conceptual model of the world. I'm going to call it the K box because my name is Kitching, and it's a snappy title, and hopefully it'll catch on. And you know, perhaps one day I'll be famous. That's assuming that any of this makes sense to you and other people. But you can see what I've done is expanded that conceptual idea of, here's a rat, it pushes a lever, the light comes on, it gets a treat, the light comes on, stuff like that. So this rat is facing an educational experience, a particular situation where it's facing a physical experience, and it's looking for a predicted outcome. It knows what to expect, as we do with the word this. Contextually, we're comfortable, and with space and up, you know, we there's no threat there. We know what happened before up, and what could happen after. And if we could only string all of those concepts together, then we'd have a means of creating understanding. In order to do that for an AI, we'd have to add this meta layer that I talked about discrete event simulation previously. So there's a load of work involved, but with a bunch of people to help, not just me, I believe it's technically possible. And I've been doing the technically possible for 25 years or more with computers. Well, I've been called a senior software engineer since before 2000. I'm not sure quite when. 98, I think, something like that. Gave me a car once. Yeah, sometimes I've even been called a software architect, but not very often because they get paid better. So I think what I'm suggesting makes sense. Hopefully, after all this time, you're not so totally wrung out as to not be able to ask me anything or ask any clarifications or anything. What I'll do is I'll whiz back up to the top on sort of the global view of stuff. Do you want to start asking me anything or perhaps commenting? Maybe you could go away and actually comment on what I've written, perhaps. That would be nice. It was after there was a breakdown somewhere. Yeah, I could tell you about Hegel, if you like, Hegel's view of truth as a process. That's quite, he's quite useful. Yeah. So that I'm not taking you through that as a linear step. Maybe I should actually rewrite this document in the way that I've described it in this talk. Anyway, I hope that you're all there and none of you've chewed any limbs off or anything like that in putting up with me. Do you want to come off mute, anybody, and ask me anything or say anything now?
Hi James, it's Matt. It's a question. Have you got any visual sort of like take-throughs of the application itself? Any prototypes of it running in any sort of like IDE?
There are. I don't have a prototype of the thing. I have visual things of what it's possible to model.
Yeah. So I had wondered if like maybe you'd like loaded something up.
Fuck off, Ben. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Right. Right. Yeah, if you go onto YouTube, you can see what is possible with discrete event simulation.
Yeah.
A bit more. Yeah. I know this is fluid logistics. That's not too.
Layner's Witness Horizon enables companies to rapidly develop feature-rich models and digital twins that provide unparalleled insight and freedom to test choices in a risk-free virtual environment. Predictive digital twins make it easy to aggregate, visualize, and experiment with business data to make better investment plans, resourcing schedules, and operational decisions by asking what-if questions. Witness will allow you to address situations.
You can see there that it's possible to construct incredibly complicated stuff. And actually each one of these things that is moving around could actually be a simulation model. In fact, it will be a simulation model itself.
Yeah.
It may be at a one level, or it may be constructed from multiple other levels of stuff.
Yeah, I had seen a few seminars recently on digital twin technology, so that's it's quite cool stuff. But yeah, that was pretty much all I wanted to ask was like how far you had got with like a visual representation.
The difficulty that I've had, I mean, you can. I've been trying to understand, trying to explain this stuff, because I start off right. I mean, as you know, I've got these wacky glasses on now, which means that words I'm able to see in 3D, and words don't wobble in front of my eyes, and I don't tend to fall asleep after reading very rapidly, because not only am I dyslexic, I've also got something called Mersenne syndrome, and these aren't actually vain, flashy glasses. That they are imports from California, and I live in the UK, but that's because they allow me to see three-dimensional space. So my brain has been screwed for years, essentially, and the amount of stuff that I've done over years trying to get my head around things in different iterations of stuff is just sad and huge, and I'm still not managing to succeed in writing it up that well. which is in part why I wanted to do this video, to see whether or not I could verbally explain it to someone, and then if someone, you know, the problem with modeling the semantic primes there in virtual reality, it's a big chunk of work, but it's not a humongously huge and impossible chunk of work. You know, if you got some university students doing some student projects, potentially from multiple universities, or you did it as a Google Summer of Code type thing, you could nail this. But that would be the kind of effort. You know, it needs to be a hackathon type topic. But the trouble is that I've just spent, you know, far too long talking to you to explain to you.
Yeah.
We've got to the start line and it's taken us 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, this is the problem with the language understanding problem. I mean, if you look at the conversations with experts, these are experts who would you know, exist on one university floor and wouldn't talk to the other people on other floors, whereas this is a problem that descends across all of those floors, is heavily interwoven, and that's why I think in a major way nobody has fixed it so far, because it's outside the space of people's journals. There isn't money in it, and it's actually just also too damn complicated. Whereas I've fell on my feet, and as you can see, because of the experiences that I've had in terms of being an ex-molecular biologist, discrete event simulation modeler, and person who, you know, there's a story there that has led me to, and also because I've got the ability to join those dots. But you know, I've been in a lucky position to say, hang on, world, we can do this, I believe. But you know, I'm not articulate enough to write it all down very easily. You know, I mean, if Wiley, the book publisher, were to give me a book deal and say, take a sabbatical from my work, that would be incredible. And then I could write it up. And, you know, if I could work with an editor, I could write it up. Because, you know, if you dip into this, hopefully you'll you know, if you can come back with any comments and say, yeah, it's starting to make sense, but it's bloody hard work, this stuff. But of course, that's why I find it entertaining, because I'm geeky like that. Yeah. Any more questions?
Hello.
Hi, Julian.
Yep. I guess I was wondering. So you want to contact like academics? I was wondering like what you were like hoping to contact academics about.
Ah, okay. Yeah, this was covered earlier, and is in the yeah, I've not we touched on this. There's the Open Source Robotics Foundation that are responsible for ROS, the robotic operating system. Think Windows, but for running robots. And also a simulation system, which think autonomous car technology for robots, except it's more game controller rather than autonomous, but it's like video game type stuff. Gazebo for running different sorts of robots, but it's humanoid robots that I'm interested in. So if you looked at the DARPA Gazebo and Robotic Challenge, you'll see some videos that we shot earlier. So in order to work with them, I need to hook into their existing software using a common external clock in order to synchronize with them. If you're a technologist, you'll understand that common clocks on networking is what you need. The gazebo thing already supports plugins, so you know, if they give me the hooks, I can work with them. Linguists, well, I tried talking to a number of different linguists, and if you look at the different flavour of linguists that there are, it's a huge field, and none of them seem to like talking to each other, and none of them seem to like technology. So I need to find the ones that actually I think the class of linguists that I want is a very rare being, which what we've been describing about here is computational cognitive linguistics. Yeah. So the taking language, understanding the nature of thought and experience and cognition and meaning, and connecting it to computers. Now in the UK, there are only, as far as I'm aware, 2 university departments, UCL and Cambridge, that have people that call themselves that. Well, you know, if I can knock this description up a bit better so that it makes sense a bit more, I'll be contacting them. And actually UCL, there's somebody else that I've spoken of what's it, Friston's free energy principle. In terms of, people talk about, and I've talked about this, this computational theory of mind. He's got a computational theory of mind, but actually in the grand scheme of what I've described here, it's all this infrastructure simplifies his stuff, and his stuff becomes what they call an optimization function of a discrete event simulation model. You know, so it trivializes something that in the academic world is being experienced as some incredibly complicated and difficult mathematics. Well, yeah, you could understand that would be incredibly complicated and difficult mathematics, wouldn't you, if you were having to write that out as maths? Yeah, but if you draw it as pictures, it's a lot easier. So I want to talk to him and say, love your work, don't you want to do it this way? Because then actually your really complicated stuff becomes trivial, and actually your really complicated stuff actually is overly simplistic and not hitting the mark. So hinted at, I've tried to explain that I think the data model of consciousness is a Markov hypergraph. That's a bit of a long thing to say, and you know, you can read about those as concepts on Wikipedia and try and get your head around what I mean of how that actually is a meaningful way of interpreting language. Yeah, now the devs, formalism people, discrete event simulation people, there's all this open source stuff about that isn't anywhere near as powerful or as my old chums who used to employ me at Lana, because you know, we were the world leaders. I wrote the first simulation translation between BPM and simulation, and now there's robotic process automation is a whole industry based on that. I reckon. I think I'm partly responsible. That's quite cool, that is, isn't it? So the open source academic stuff isn't anywhere near as well developed. Apart from there's the godfather of devs, who's you know, behind this research, and actually I did mail him last night, just to because for some reason, yeah, I need to log on because I pay them every month, Wikipedia. They're brilliant. See, yeah, Bernard P. Ziegler. He's the man. Him and his chums. For multi-simulation technology. So he's the guy behind figuring the maths. Oh, whoops! No, I didn't mean to do that. That does the plumbing. That does the clever stuff. Oh, no, hang on. No, I've gone to the wrong thing. There it is. Arizona. Yeah, so there is a website, Arizona website, that is to do with their simulation. I haven't actually found it yet. Their simulation work. Faculty videos. Anyway. He's actually also got a commercial version of a discrete event simulation engine. Anyway, we need to pick the most suitable one as a starting point, because I know one that really works, and I've looked at quite a few, and there's a fair amount that needs doing in order to get them to work to the level that that Witness works at. I've spoken to my former employer. In fact, I Witnessed the MD, who I messaged the MD, David Jones, who gave me a thumbs up for this. I'll have to send him the video. He obviously wasn't able to join us. Because if I could collaborate with them on the right terms, because this stuff has to be open source, because the chances of how can I say, psychopath or potential person like some politicians who might be regarded as unsuitable within the international community for being in a position of such great leadership. What can I say? I'm an Obama fan. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I wouldn't like Donald Trump to have control over this technology. It would, I think so many other lives other than white middle-class Americans matter, or even working-class white Americans. So that is one lot of questions. Then also, the ability to connect these models to the physical world, the physicality. I've had a bit of a chat with a world expert on SLAM, who's also interested in robotics and AI, which is how come such a very such an educated man was prepared to answer my emails, and that's Andrew Davidson. He's the professor at the Dyson Robotics Lab at Imperial College. I've had some correspondence with him, who seems really nice. Anyway, he's an expert in something called SLAM, which stands for simultaneous localization and mapping, which is quite a mouthful. And that is a technology where, if you imagine your AI robot wanders into a room and is kind of basically aware of the objects in it and how far all those objects are, where they are in relation to one another. Now, so we need a mechanism of being able to take that information so that it can be used within a gazebo type world, which there are some barriers to doing that at the moment. And one of them is actually the speed, and looking at what people have done in computer vision with their algorithms. Intuitively, you know, from an outsider point of view, this would kind of make sense, in that when we are wandering around the place and trying to identify a picture of, say, a dog jumping and twisting so that we can only see 3 of its legs, we don't fail to recognize that it's a dog. We know it's a dog because, in a sense, we have what do they call it? Thinking like they have a like a balloon animal designer. You know, we understand dogs in terms of their level of flexibility and the size of the balloons that you need in order to put a dog together. So that, you know, we know it's a real dog, as opposed to a soft toy dog, you know, behaving like a rag doll being tossed up in the air as it jumps. You know, we know it's a real dog. So the ability to describe something as complicated as a dog in 3-dimensional space and its capacity for bendiness is something that the bunch of people in the gazebo world have done. They've got yeah, if we go visit gazebo.org, there's a whole download of a standard for yeah, SDF format. Yeah, so that's a way of mapping the physicality of a jumping dog. But you know, the people in these different teams need to join up and start thinking in a better way and use other people's stuff in order to get us to where we want. Yeah, so that's the gist of it, really. So this is like an invitation to come and join my playground, really.
Yeah, yeah, this is stuff that I'm also very interested in, and I'm sort of working on a project to sort of put something like this together.
Oh, you're interested in this as an idea? Yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard of the idea of cybernetics?
I have, yes. Yeah, I've. It's quite an old idea, isn't it? Cybernetics. It's been around for a while. I'd read about it and thought, oh, yeah, that looks like a sort of a historical. You know, before people had discrete event simulation, it was what people were working on. It's got an older heritage. But yeah, stitching together cybernetics and what I've been talking about would be a good plan, definitely. Yeah. Yeah,
I guess. Yeah.
Actually, could you send me your contact details, or maybe we could, you know, if we could, it would be good to keep in contact if you're that would be nice. And also, actually, I don't have Jerome's contact, so you know, if anybody else. But I know Matt and Ellie really well, but I won't explain why. You can probably guess. Yeah, Ellie's my daughter. Matt's her boyfriend. There you are. Okay. Any more questions?
So, like, what do you see as the ideal situation where this this gets implemented?
Well, what I would hope would be that, I mean, if you look at the people backing, if you look at what DARPA after. Yeah, in terms of understandable AI. This came out a little while ago. Explainable and understandable AI. They've got these grand ambitions of how they're going to make AI understandable. And compared to what I've just been explaining, it's 40% there. You know, they've not arrived in the same chapter, let alone the same page. I mean, it might be, of course, that they, as a military organisation, are keeping it all very quiet. I don't know, but I think my ideas are a lot better than theirs, which is cool because there's a lot of them. You know, the amount of money these people have is well, yeah, they are AI next campaign. I've actually missed out. There is an open question. I could have put in a suggestion to them, but I wasn't able to get my words together. But I think they'd be interested in this. Maybe I should just send them the video, see what happens. Who else? DARPA. Yeah. So if you could get DARPA, OpenAI, so that's Elon Musk, or it was, and Facebook and Google and whatever, all to collaborate on putting together an extension to if you look at ROS, the robotic operating system. So this is like Windows for robots, how to get robots to work. So this is, we're wanting to put money into this, convincing them that all of this is a good idea. Then, they'd have to do it as ROS is entirely open source, so there's no obstacles for as far as they're concerned about investing in that kind of technology. It's a question of whether or not anybody's convinced and prepared to listen to me, because I've been trying to describe this for donkeys and have just confused the pants off a load of different academics who got bored and decided they didn't want to listen to me anymore because I didn't make sense.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's a well, I think I can talk to academics and they'll think that this is a good idea, and they can explain stuff, but then actually when I start to write it down, I met up with a guy in Surrey, and went on to a gaming seminar that they were running for people who wanted to be gamers. So I caught him in the after party over the vol au vents and had a chat. Adrian. See if he's runs a research centre at Surrey University that is behind the BBC's use of digital pictorial technology. It's got about 500 researchers under him and has the BBC funding him. And as you can imagine, they do cool stuff. Oh yeah, here it is. And so I've met him, and he was interested in talking, but then he's never got back to me, and he's not answered my emails. So either he's got incredibly busy, or my writing has put him off. So, well, lots of pretty pictures there, as you can imagine. if you know, the BBC, oh no, 150 researchers, sorry, Vision Research Group, largest audio vision research group in the UK. Yeah. So if I could get him on board again, that would be good. But, you know, I mean, getting people on board, there's no way I'm going to do this and give up my day job unless, you know, someone were to give me, you know, I need to work. I'm 55, and if I get made redundant, the chances of getting a job, you know, with my legacy skills are low. With these new skills, it might be high, but they're so bleeding edge that it would be a challenge potentially. And you know, I need to earn money for the next well, till I'm 67. So and I'm very happy where I am. So you know, unless somebody's going to give me a tenured university position without having a PhD or any academic track record, that doesn't happen very often. You know, I'm not going to be able to pursue this myself, but you know, I want to share it because actually dying with some idea that is, well, for me, I'm thinking it's incredibly groundbreaking. Yeah, I mean, I mean, if this works, I mean, wow, yeah, this is redefining the human world experience. This is, you know, I mean, I kind of joke to people that you know, I might get a book tour with Tim Berners-Lee potentially, because cracking the artificial conceptual understanding and understanding of language, you know, it would actually replace the World Wide Web in effect, in that we'd be all talking to Star Trek-like computers. Which would be pretty wow, wouldn't it? Really. So yeah, I you know, I don't want to die having not communicated that. That's how big I think that is that this is. Actually, I've not mentioned why I called my project. Oops, this is why I've called it the HEMSEYE project. It's actually the Hive Mind's Eye project, open source project, which sounds a bit weird, but I'll just explain that as to why you can, why this thing scales actually as well. People have done this kind of thing in ROS already, but it's a technology that seems to have died, or perhaps gone private. You know, it needs to be reawakened and stitched up. Anyway, what imagine a Wi-Fi enabled bee arriving on some situation that it's never experienced before. So it visually takes an assessment of what's going on, and it sort of calls back to the HEMSEYE server, the Hive Mind's Eye server, and does a rapid search of past experience using, yeah, I should do a bit of a write-up about something called algebraic topology. That's what we need. Anyway, I've studied that a little bit as well. So we could grab stuff visually really fast. Well, there's a couple of people who are working on that from what I found. And it isn't some, you know, when I talk to the Imperial chappie, Andrew, it's not it's part of this balloon animal thing to be able to mathematically describe shape with a number, as it were. So you can describe a shape and then get a number and then just use that number to look stuff up, just retrieve it ultra fast. So that would be where you'd want to get to, but there is existing technology for, you know, well, internet about describing stuff of, you know, there's this bee needing to make a decision about what to do. then pops into its mind, oh, hang on, we've seen this scenario before. All you need to do is this. That would be beneficial for the hive. Or, we have seen this before, but the last time anybody tried this, they died. They did this, so don't do that. So this is the hive mind's eye. It's the shared, it's not a shared consciousness. It's a shared capacity for vision and prior learning, which with AI projects is a big problem, because, you know, they get investment for a couple of years and there's all this learning data, and then it gets dumped and forgotten. So when I was talking about open source ownership of data, community ownership of data, it's this data that's actually going to drive this type of technology. So if you use blockchain technology for tracking, you know, the ownership of this data and controlling this data, then you can make sure the irresponsible and socially inappropriate psycho tossers aren't allowed to abuse what we've done. There you are.
Do you have much collaboration going on at the moment with the project?
No. I've tried to speak to, well, I spoke to Andrew a while ago, and, you know, his interests are very much on the fringe of stuff. I emailed the guy who is the president of the UK SIM. This is a simulation and modelling special interest group that meets up with other similar bodies around Europe. He's a retired professor, doesn't have much time, interest, and motivation, but wrote me a very nice response and got me an introduction into a bunch of people who I need to include his quote of saying, you know, the idea of adding a metadata layer to a discrete event simulation API is a, you know, brilliant idea, no brainer. We should be doing this kind of, that's what he said. I contacted the current chair of the Applied Association of Linguistics or something or other, who, I mean, I'm not an applied linguist, so I don't know what they're up to. But I thought that they might be, but, you know, it might be their right turf. But anyway, she said, wow, very interesting, good luck. You need somebody with lexicographical skills. Not too sure what that is. Vaguely looked it up afterwards. And, you know, try these people. I tried one person who is interested in language acquisition. The Center for Language Acquisition Study, apparently, according to her, is in Aberystwyth, but they didn't answer my emails after a couple of times. So perhaps I was badly spelled and incoherent, and they didn't want to talk to me. But, you know, if enough people, other academics, get the message, then they will have better email addresses than I have, perhaps, or they might have money. And then when they call up Aberystwyth, who know about this stuff, they'll probably listen then. But they were a waste of time. There was a chap, I've tried various people in Surrey University, and I think I badly expressed myself with them, and you know, they've not been responsive. One chap, I was thinking that I would be able to get funding for this for myself quite some years back, and yeah, I've given up on the idea, and that's why I've gone Creative Commons open source, which I think is ethically the right thing to do in any case. But I need to revisit him, because he was at least sympathetic. but I'd got the modeling ideas wrong back then, and thinking that you should model words with using BPMN technology, which was never going to work, whereas modeling words as simulation elements themselves directly within the simulation software is the way to go. So yeah, I need to touch base with them. I'll send him this video and say it's got Go Faster Stripes on now, and it's better. And he's a professor of cognitive science, whatever that is. So he might be more inclined to. I mean, he fair play to him. He did read an initial proposal. There's a couple of lecturers in Birmingham, donkeys years back. I got accepted onto a PhD position with them to research an early position in this project, but there was difficulty about, we couldn't raise the money to get the project going, and also they didn't want to run it as open source, and they wanted the university required that they have full intellectual property ownership of it. And I firmly said no, which I think is fair enough. Yeah. So yeah, and I actually once met a what are they called? A Turing Award winner at a wedding. I mean, as a computer scientist person, you may or may not have ever met one, but of course, awesome human being. I had to go introduce myself and shake this person's hand, this guy's hand, and say, "I've never met one of you before. It's an honor."
Do you know what his area of research was?
AI.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so more recent one then.
Well, no, actually going back to the 60s. Yeah, but he was more on. I've forgotten his first name. I'm Facebook friends with because I was at the wedding. Feinbauer, and he was involved in what is it? What's it? Intelligent systems. The early AI stuff, but then he did branches to some, more theoretical, philosophical work, which essentially this is a lot of it is, how do you slice this problem? It's very philosophical in nature to try and address this problem. So yeah, I need to. I'll send him the video and say, yeah, prof from Stanford Uni, who's working with DARPA on their explainable AI still. What do you reckon? Aren't my ideas better than DARPA's?
Sounds good.
What do you think? Can we work? I mean, I've laid it all out for them. All the ideas are there, but then again, what I'm saying is, I'm not going to leave my job unless somebody comes up with an absolutely ridiculous deal for me, or I'll continue doing this as a hobby or whatever. I'm not seeking. I'm trying to get the ideas out there for people because, Elon Musk wants to save the world by going to Mars, and what's his name? Chap in the wheelchair, the physicist, was reckoning. Stephen Hawking. Yeah, Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking reckoned that. Wow! Yes, it's the diva. Yeah, we have a female cat who's demanding, and very pretty. Oh. Stephen Hawking said that he reckoned that humanity had got 100 years to get to Mars before they made such a mess of the world that we were all going to die anyway. And bearing in mind what a mess climate control work is happening. I mean, if climate change escalates out of control, if the heat on the planet the planet can become unlivable. So we need this human-like AI technology to make living on Mars possible, because when the I've forgotten the name, the Arnie film, when your bubble bursts on Mars, you need a team of robots to go out and fix it before you run out of air. And it's a very inhospitable place, and having them do all the construction for you would be a good plan. So I see it as a potential savior. Also, yeah, then actually there's a whole dodginess about how there's actually people have calculated there are already too many people on the planet, which is horrible. I don't want to kill anybody, but people are having too many babies. I was irresponsible. I had two. Ellie, Matt, you can probably only have one. All right. Because of the carbon footprint, there are too many people on the planet damaging the planet continuously, that we need to reduce the human population before we destroy ourselves. And this technology will help save us by getting to Mars, hopefully. There you are.
I'm interested in collaborating on this project.
Great.
I've sent you my contact details on Zoom.
Okay. Yes, I saw. Yes. I'm sure. Oh, hang on. Yeah, I'll. Yeah. Yeah. I better make sure that I've. Somehow Zoom is. I want to get to the full screen now.
Might be because you're sharing screen, so it's preventing from sharing messages.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe
I'll stop sharing.
Screen.
You're right.
There you go.
Young people know how to use the technology. Yeah, that's lovely. Right. Oh, hang on. So yeah, I did see that there was a right. Actually, yeah, if I just stick that there. Yeah. And yeah, we can discuss that as to who you are and what we can do and stuff. So
yeah, cool.
You're terrific that you want to talk more, and yeah.
I guess my background is I'm working as an IT consultant for a global IT firm. My work has been with government clients, and I graduated from the ANU, and I studied computer science.
I don't know who the ANU is, I'm sorry.
Australian National University.
Oh, okay. So actually, I'm trying to. That is actually the University of Anna Wiezbeica, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Have you ever met her?
No, I haven't. Have you heard of Marcus Hutter?
No.
Okay, he's an AI. But yeah, I don't know. I do have contacts at ANU that I could use for something like this potentially.
Right. Great. Sure. Well, more the merrier. And you know, I'd like to feed the ethical, safe plan for saving the planet and the world and making people happy.
Cool.
Anything from anyone else? Jerome is looking extremely stylish, actually, in that picture that you've got there. Love the bow tie. And yeah, I've got some hats that.
I'd give you a video, but I'm not dressed.
A while ago, I pasted a picture of me on a particularly hot day, undressed in my office
Please
chair.
don't mention that. I didn't need to see that.
Yeah, which is, of course, the so much of one of the advantages of Zoom technology and being in a pandemic and being able to work from home. Yeah, so I've got no aircon, but I didn't care because I was naked. Right. Well, thank you very much for being so tolerant, and Ellie and Matt. This is you've gone beyond the call of family, putting up with listening to me silently. You know, I don't ever expect you ever to do that again. All right.
It's interesting stuff. Like I say, I'm an outsider with completely no technical knowledge and therefore no worthwhile opinions to contribute. But from what I've understood of it, it sounds very interesting and like
yeah,
a bit of a no-brainer to approach it with different, you know, departments of thought.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of technology behind it, but actually, the philosophical common sense of it, standing far enough back from it, there's a load of people who've essentially been trying to do this since either Alan Turing accidentally died or got killed himself, whatever. We're not too sure, apparently. He was a very sloppy worker and using cyanide as part of his work. So he might not have killed himself at all, allegedly. That's what his family say anyway. So, but, you know, since those days, people have aspired to try and get their heads around a route and a recipe. But, you know, it's to me, I think of it as an Everest of a problem. And it's of that kind of an intellectual scale. Because, you know, thousands, tens of thousands, whatever, you know, the trail of failure and the millions spent on this is absolutely huge. And wouldn't it be cool if you could nail it? Yeah. Wow. That's the plan. Right. Well, so thank you very much, everyone. And yeah, Jerome, if you want to, you can see the from this. Hopefully, you'll be able to get my contact details if you want to stay in contact and contribute.
We're connected on LinkedIn.
Sorry?
We're connected on LinkedIn.
Oh, are we? Okay,
yeah.
Right, sure.
That's how you invited me.
Sorry?
That's how you invited me.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, sorry. It was late last night. Yeah. No, sure. Okay, that's great. Well, terrific. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm late, and my wife is wanting me to be in Lewis, so I should go and say goodbye now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, James.
For presenting it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.